Urbanization is the physical growth of urban areas resulting from rural migration.
So basically, urbanization is when you take a rural or a green space and turn it into a place with lots of buildings and industries like Toronto.
So we call a place like Toronto an urban area. Urbanization can be measured by the percentage of the population living in cities.
One main characteristic of urbanization is the population density in an urban area compared to a more rural place.
Urbanization mostly encourages non-renewable resources like oil and coal. Also, more pollution is encouraged by human activity.
This puts further strain on the planetary resources, so essentially, we are borrowing from the future.
Urban sprawl is when there is an increase in land area at a faster rate than the increase in population.
If the city doubles its population, but the land area more than doubles, you would have urban sprawl.
Like when people buy and build mansions.
Also, when people build houses and no one moves into them. Pros of urbanization. Helps country by creating technical growth, which leads to mechanization, which helps the country's exports. More fun with interesting activities. Stores and work can be close, there are more jobs, and government has priority to help bigger cities so there are better living conditions.
The cons of urbanization. Causes global warming and emissions, contributing to allergies and respiratory problems. There are less forests and it reduces the density of plants, and plants keep the world cool. It destroys the environment because we are using electricity and energy to build. Traffic congestions create noise pollution. Cities are overgrowing, so there is a lack of sanitation.
Urbanization and sprawl are both resource intensive. They require a lot of work and therefore have been actually very beneficial for putting people to work. So in a way they have been beneficial to the economy. On the other hand, because they are so resource intensive, many see suburbanization and sprawl as inefficient and wasteful. One could argue that it's not sustainable in the long run, and that in fact, while you might get a lot of bang for your buck in the short run building it, over time you use up a lot of resources that could have been used for other things. And so in the long run, many argue that it's not beneficial for the economy. Clearly, the current pattern of building suburbs that are automobile dependent is the most important factor that is driving global warming. Now, the automobile is not the only source of greenhouse gas emissions, but it's the primary source. Of course, the burning of coal in coal-fired generating stations for producing electricity, the burning of fossil fuels in factories and even home heating, they all also contribute to global warming. But the most important factor, single most important factor, is the burning of fossil fuels for transportation. And so that means that if we were to build communities that were not so automobile dependent, we could scale back at least the environmental problems that are driving global warming. One thing I haven't yet talked about is the absolute dependence of current patterns of urbanization on fossil fuels. Urbanization, as I mentioned, has been continuing for thousands of years. It's only really in the last 50 to 60 years that we've built cities that are so dependent on fossil fuels. There's still lots of oil in the ground, but it's going to become more and more expensive to extract. And that means that continuing our way of life will become more and more expensive. It also means that because we're burning fossil fuels when we are transporting ourselves via the automobile, that we're contributing to global warming. And if we continue to build cities that are automobile dependent, then we're not going to be able to reduce the environmental effects of our current patterns of urbanization.
An urban heat island is a metropolitan area that is warmer than its surrounding rural regions due to human activity. A metropolitan area is an area that is densely populated and have become key economic and political regions. Urban heat islands decreases air quality, produces pollutants, and destroys the ozone layer. It also alters wind patterns, precipitation, humidity, clouds, and fog. But urban heat islands aren't all bad. It increases growing seasons and decreases the weak tornadoes. Urban heat islands increases the magnitude of heat waves. Also, in the US, 1,000 people die each year from extreme heat.
Urbanization seems like we are improving the quality of life, but in reality, we are setting ourselves back in the long term. There's only so much land that we can use to grow crops. A lot of this fertile soil is being covered with houses in low-density cities. By 2050, it is guessed that 80% of the world's population will live in urban areas. By 2050, it is predicted that urbanization will cause a decline of population due to air and water pollution.
Because of the pollution created by urban cities, there will be an increase in low-quality air, which can result in health problems and death. By 2025, 29 cities will be home to more than 10 million people. We're at a crossroad in our society. We can choose to continue urbanizing in the way that we've been already doing. Or we can start to urbanize in a more environmentally friendly and people-friendly way. The urbanization that has happened already has happened in a more sprawl-like way, where we build low-density housing on the edge of the city. This means that the people who live way out in the suburbs have to commute large distances to their work. Also, the sprawl that is happening is mostly being built on fertile farmland that was being used to grow the food we eat. This is why we think urbanization is counter-beneficial towards the environment and our society.